Welcome back to Just Blazor Programming, and I thank you for your patience. I know it's been a while since I made a video, but here it is. So, if you know what I do on this channel, I make polls, and a lot of polls, in order to see what videos you want to see and interest in them. And this is one of them. So if you look at the poll, that hopefully it's in front of me, you will see that a lot of people wanted the Blazor WebAssembly project deep dive. AKA, you want to know what the project structure within a Blazor WebAssembly project means, essentially. I know that a lot of you come from either different .NET technologies or you just don't have any .NET experience whatsoever. So looking at a project is kind of daunting, and because you have no context to it, you don't know what's going on when you see it. And most of my channel is just basically talking about the Blazor pages and components and stuff, because that's the majority of what the work you will do in Blazor. But there are still other components to building a Blazor project that does have to do with the actual project structure that I don't talk about as much, because that's usually I do very focused videos. But today we're going to be covering what are the most important parts of that project structure that I think you need to know and to have context. And like, there's obviously it's going to be more than anything I could ever cover here in this one video, but this will at least demystify some of the files and the things that you will see in that solution that might be causing some confusion. And if you already are a .NET expert, you probably will already know what they could be. But if you're coming from, let's say, a different place, maybe you don't know certain, let's just call it the vernacular between the two different solutions, between whatever solution you're used to versus the Blazor one, then maybe this will clear things up as well. So this is basically for everyone that just wants a refresher or needs more context in what they're looking at when they go into a Blazor project. So let's get started. It's time to plug in JustBlazor.com's free Blazor cheat sheet. If you want a free Blazor cheat sheet that I made, that I sometimes use when I create my projects, you go to JustBlazor.com. Get your free Blazor cheat sheet right here. It has a bunch of the syntax and a bunch of information all on one page, so that you don't have to keep going back to the Microsoft Docs and Stack Overflow and all that stuff just to ask basic, simple things that you could have a reference of right on your desktop. So just get your free Blazor cheat sheet on JustBlazor.com. I worked very hard on it, and I would appreciate it. Just put your name, your email, get access, boom, free and clear. Now, the other thing I want to discuss is my old website, contractmaster.com. Here, I'm going to keep the sessions here for now, that I do 15-minute free sessions, and I only do the 1 hour, 4 1-hour sessions a month now. But if you're interested in that, or you just want to take advantage of the free 15-minute session, go here, book a session on Calendly, and you'll be good to go. So let's get back to the content. All right, let's get started. No tricks or anything. We're going to start a brand new, fresh project, and then we're just going to walk through things that might be of interest. So in this case, we're just going to create a brand new Blazor WebAssembly project. So just make sure you go there. Make sure you click Blazor WebAssembly. And then we're going to give it a name, WebAssembly Test. That's fine. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about this page. The authentication type is basically what kind of authentication you're expecting to have on your project. So there are two that you could choose from for Blazor WebAssembly. Blazor Server, I think there you have another option. I don't remember what it was. But this means that individual accounts is something that you're going to take care of, aka that you're going to have your information is going to be stored already somewhere. So all your client's information, your user information, the roles, all that stuff already exists, and you want to couple it into this project, or you are planning to have it and manage it separately. Microsoft Identity Platform means that you're going to be using the Microsoft authentication schema, which I think is what is used for the business part. If I don't know if you ever seen it, but they do have this B2B kind of stuff. I forgot what it's called, but they connect a bunch of apps together, and they use the same authentication between them. And I think that is used through this Microsoft Identity Platform. I'm not too sure about it, but that makes the most amount of sense to me. So if you have an Azure account or something like that, or a Microsoft account, you go through Azure and then you do a bunch of stuff, and then you're using the Identity Platform to do all that. Individual account is something that I've worked and done videos on, because I created my own database, my own SQL. I'm the one that made sure that they all were that I'm the one that took care of when they were inserted, and then all the rules and stuff. But The other thing is that when you select individual accounts on a Blazor WebAssembly project, what's going to happen is you're going to download or you're going to have Identity Server 6. So Identity Server 6 is the what used to be Identity Server 4, what used to be used and used to be completely free. Now they have like a paid model up to a certain point. Like it's free up to a certain point, and it's how you can do authentication and authorization for your project off the bat. It's a more modern, more up-to-date version of that older model, because in November the older one, Identity Server 4, is going to be not supported anymore, so you have to have Identity Server 6. But I made a few videos on how to do that specifically. Just know that you'll be getting basically a third-party library to help you facilitate authentication authorization. That's what individual accounts is going to do for you if you select this. I'm going to be discussing ASP.NET Core hosted. So what all this is going to do is tell Microsoft to set up the template project for you in a specific way. The way is that your server is going to be an ASP.NET or .NET Core server project within the solution. You're gonna see it along with your client, and then you're gonna have like a shared project in there as well. So I'll get into that a little bit later. Progressive web application, I can probably make a video on that separately, so I'm not gonna bog down this video. I don't know what this is, to be honest. I have never used it, so let's just create this project. I'm not gonna have the authentication type. I think that is its own video, and I think I have created a video on it before. So we're just gonna continue moving on. So what this video is going to be about is I'm going to discuss the portions of the video I don't normally talk about when I go and make my videos. Normally I talk about stuff like the pages and how to do certain things within these, because most of the work that you're going to do when it comes to Blazor is going to be on these pages, and then you're going to probably make controllers and models and do the C# logic that, if you're not used to doing that, that is, it's all .NET stuff. And if you're coming from .NET, then you know that a lot of the work in the backend is going to be done using like C# classes and all that stuff, along with using the Blazor framework. But that's all my other videos. This video is going to be very different. We're going to be avoiding that to the best of our ability, the best of my ability, and talk about the stuff around the project that normally is just taken for granted. And if you're coming from a place that has no reference to what's happening here, it might be very daunting, and you just might be like, what's all this stuff? Or if you're coming from a different .NET technology, that also might be a little bit different, because you might be seeing things that look familiar, but they're not really. So you're like, what is this? Is this what I think it is? Like, I'm going to get into that here. So let's start with the easy peasy stuff. This is a solution. Our solution is composed of projects, and our project is what has all our work basically, and all the information, our classes, our files, everything you need to make your project. That's what your solution is, essentially, in a nutshell. When you do the ASP.NET host, when you select that button, you will be the Visual Studio will create for you 3 projects. These are projects here. Whatever the name is I chosen a very long name for some reason. Blazor app WASM test.client, .server, and .shared. So this is basically going to be acting like a full stack project. What that means is that we have a client side, so our client, we have a server side, our backend, and then our shared is not like a side. Basically, the shared has a specific purpose that has nothing to do with the tiers. What it is supposed to do is share, like it sounds, between the server and the client. That's the whole purpose of this. If you have things that like models and stuff, when I say models, I mean like classes like this that you want to share between the two. So instead of having duplicate classes everywhere, you can have it here. So that's what that's for. But back to the full stack nature of this particular project, you have your front end, which is your client, the back end, which is your server, and then your server is going to connect to a database, presumably. We're not going to be doing that here. I'm not going to show you how to do all that. I think I've done other videos on that before, and probably going to do more videos than that later on. But for our purposes, just know that we have a front end and a back end, and inevitably the back end has to connect to some database somewhere else, and that is what the full stack is. That is what a 3-tier architecture that we're trying to produce here is. And shared, all it is something that these two can have a dependency on. That's what it's called. a dependency that allows it access to the shared. So if we go, so the way so what a dependency is what a project has access to essentially. So it's called a dependency, but what it really is just I have access to this project. So Blazor server off the bat has a dependency on the client and the shared. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this coming up. And Blazor client only has access to the shared. So if I go to the dependency, to the projects here, and when you go here, you can actually add a reference to this project if you want to. So you could actually add another dependency to it. If you decide to put another project because you want to demarcate it in some special way, there are, there's an architecture for that if you want to do it, blah, blah, blah. There are your considerations for your project. Typically, it's usually just 2 or 3 projects because you want to keep a front end and a back end, and then something that's shared between the two. That's typically how .NET does it, and that's also how React and Angular will do it because they're also full stack if you're doing it in this way. And you can add your dependencies if you want. Also, not having this dependency does not preclude you from allowing the client to do calls to the server through API calls, HTTP calls, essentially. So another thing to note is that the client talks to the server through HTTP calls. So in Blazor WebAssembly, unlike Blazor Server has an actual SignalR connection between what will be the front end and the back end. It's all done in the back end, really. But in this case, there is no connection like that. The only thing that connects the two is the fact that you could have a dependency like this, or you have the client just call the API calls through JSON or whatever. So for that kind of discussion, that can go a lot deeper, and I could be more specific and show you like a graph or whatever. But that does not have as much to do with the product structure. I'm just telling you what the point of all of this is. So I'm not going to go too deeply on it. Just understand that the dependency just allows us access to certain resources here if we want them, but the client can always talk to the server through HTTP calls without the dependencies. So that's just to clear up a question that might come up, which is like, how do you have these two communicate? That is how you would have them communicate through those calls. So moving on. All right, let's go through this. So both of these, I believe, have launch settings. Let me check properties. So yeah, so you're gonna see some duplications in the files here. So when we go down to properties, both of them have a launch setting, and all the launch setting is how your Visual Studio is gonna be set up. So that's all launch settings are. So in this case, we have our IIS setting. So IIS is basically whenever you press run, you have to have something that does the actual, actually run the website, and that will be done through this. And this is all like environment stuff. So when it says the environment, when you go into, let's make this easy. When you go and create a project for like an actual client, or when you create it for like a company, basically, you will presumably have different environments. One is when you're actually developing your code or whatever, so you can do testing on it, and then later down the process you'll change the environment so that you have it for, let's say, the production environment. Depending on the company that you work for and depending on the process you have, there could be many different environments that goes through the steps, or there could be a few. And this is just differentiating between the environments, because you could have specific code that looks for what environment that we're using in order to run specific things or to bypass specific things, because in production you probably will have your whole security architecture there. You will have a bunch of, like, if you have a firewall, you have all this stuff and whatnot. You're probably going to be wanting to make sure that your product does not bypass any of it. But if you're developing, you don't really care about those things, so you just want to make sure that you can do whatever you want, especially when it comes to authentication, authorization. You may want to bypass all that. This is a way of doing it. And they both have their own launch settings because they're both different. Now, if you don't know, Blazor WebAssembly has all its code in the browser, basically the client side. So that's why you're going to see a lot of like duplicate files, but they're not duplicate files because you're essentially having this client live somewhere else on someone else's computer for a while. And then you have your server, which has its own set of rules and stuff. So that's why it has its own launch settings, and you could do whatever you want with them, including changing like the ports and stuff. So if you run a project, you'll see it runs on a port. That's where you change all the port settings and stuff. So that's the launch settings. That is not something that is going to affect your overall product, your product at the end. What it's going to do is affect how you will run it in Visual Studio. Next thing is going to be, where is it? Is going to be within the Blazor server project. So what is app settings? So app settings for Appsettings.Json for people that are coming from a .NET, other .NET technologies, you might look at this as your web config. So if you understand what a web config file is, if you don't understand, don't worry about it. But if you do know what a web config file is, this is basically the replacement of it in this in this architecture. So app settings, you're writing in JSON, JSON. I forgot the acronym, but this is basically the key value pairs that tell you exactly what you want to do. In this case, we have just a logging setting here. So when it comes to logging, what this means is just if you're gonna have basically a different file somewhere. Either you're gonna have a different file, or you're gonna have it like on the console somewhere that allows you to basically write like your own notes or errors or stuff, so you can come back to it and see where the errors are coming from or why. So normally when you go and create an actual project for production, you'll have a logging involved, so you can see, oh, this is what happened in this place, blah, 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 where I think they broke or whatever. And that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different discussion. But that is not what Appsettings.Json only does. Since we have a development one as well, so this is for the development environment. It's already prepared for you. So what else it does? It also is the place where you put your email. What does it say? Your email settings will also go here as well. So if you have login, you're probably going to want to have email settings somewhere in there as well. You have keys and such. Oops, did I lose it? So if you have keys such as like cloud keys, you'll put it there as well. And I'm going to open up one of my projects so I can show you like an example of having like, say, the database connection. So here I have a database connection within the Appsettings.Json file, as you can see. So this is where you're going to put basically all the information for that stuff. And this is what will affect the app settings. Your app settings are also it's going to be the file that's going to be read within your program.cs file. And I'll get into that a little bit in a bit. But here is basically what you're going to put in there is essentially anything you need at the start of the programs and that you just want access to right away. This is not like launch settings. Launch settings are only for Visual Studios. This is for your actual application. So hopefully that clears that up. We're done with that. Get rid of these. So now we have program.cs. So again, we have two programs.cs here. There are two files. One is for your client, one is for your server. So the reason for that is because this is the actual beginning of your project. This is what do you call it? This is the entry point of your application for both the client and the server, as they're going to be running kind of separate. When it comes to the program.cs file in .NET 6 and beyond, if you are coming from a different .NET framework version or whatever, you will notice that there is another file that isn't there, the startup.cs file, because it's all been pushed into the program.cs. So all this is, oh, by the way, this is for the .NET people who are here who are here from a different framework, if you're trying to find a startup.cs is not here, you could have a startup.cs file if you want to in order to separate it so you can feel more comfortable with that. But in program.cs is where you're actually going to be putting your whatever you would have for your startup.cs file. You're going to be putting it here because .NET 6 has smushed them into this one place. So whether you like it or not, this is how the default of a Blazor application is going to have, and this is where all the both startup functions and your whatever will go into the program.cs are all going to be in this one file. For everyone else, that there's no real change for you because you haven't seen that specific difference. So what a program.cs file is basically the entry point of the project. So everything that you need to have set up beforehand before we could use the project has to all be here already, which includes the actual web application. So I'll get into that in a little bit. Your services, any environment variables that it needs to know, along with what else we have. So yeah, we have our root component here because it's from the client side. That's the most important thing in its side, and the fact that it has to be built. So you're essentially starting the project from here, and this is where you also will read the connection strings and all that stuff from your app settings. So this is a very important file to have, and it tells you exactly how you're going to run your project and what is going to be run in the beginning from the actual like C# code kind of stuff. It's not just it's not like the Appsettings.Json where you're just setting up your keys. Here you're actually telling it what to do, and that's what it's for. I already went over launch settings. And as for the actual services, I could get into that in a different video. I think that is another video. Another time. This can be a very big, heavy topic, and I want to do it justice. Or at the very minute, I want to be more articulate. So I'm not really gonna get into it right now, but just know that in some of my videos where I talk about services, they are put here so that you have it actually with the start of the program that you're running. And they both have their own. So client side has its own because it cares about really only the actual web portion of it. And the backend, the server, cares about what it needs. So they both are, again, like basically they're separate environments. So that's what the program.cs file does. It's just basically the file that you use to start up everything and tell it all what to do and everything that you need to start up. Let's continue on to this little one here. App.Razor. You see that? Skip anything? No, I did not. Perfect. Sorry about that. So, App.Razor. I'm sure you have seen this this file here, and we kind of just been neglecting it in my videos. You just have it there, and then you just see the layout of the program, but you understand that this is probably the one of the more important components here, because in this one, it tells us what we're gonna run, like the actual app to run. So the app.razor is the root component, and that root component is what's called in the actual program.cs file for the client side. So if I go back here, you'll see that I'm calling an app. So if I were to change the name, so let's say app1, this will change, and it's not gonna be correct anymore. I have to actually change it to app1, and anywhere else I might have that. So if I go back here, I have to change this class as well. So what's happening here is basically the root component that I've decided that my program is gonna be based around is gonna be app1.razor. And the reason why that is, or in this case, I'm gonna change it back to app.razor real quick. So that's if you ever wanna change your root component for whatever reason, you can do that. What I just did there. You can make your own component here. Okay, so it's kind of hard talking about the app.razor component without talking about the main layout. So I'll just go talk about the main layout now, and then I'll bounce back to the App.Razor component because they're both kind of tied in this case. So the main layout is actually how our application looks like. So the reason why you see the nav menu where it is because of this sidebar here, this HTML stuff here. And the reason why you have all the pages like rendering where they're rendering is because it's app body. And the reason why all that is because the main layout is a layout component itself. A layout component is a bit different than other components that you might have seen, because the layout component was made specifically so that you can have specific components that change and have to be basically everywhere within everywhere you see on the actual application, and they have to be changed all the time. So this was the solution to having that kind of problem. So whereas you would have to probably have this component continuously be recreated, the layout component does something different. So what it does is that the HTML of the component that we're expecting is going to be rendered here at the add body if it has the layout here. So if you're working with something that you will be repeatedly using, that is updated repeatedly in the programming, such as the actual layout of what it looks like this, then it's good to have a layout. You don't have to restrict your layout to just this layout piece. You can have other layouts as well if you want to have that. However, I think this is the only layout here. The only layout component right now that exists in this project is gonna be the actual one that you see the one that you see, which is the one that has like the nav menu on the side, and then all the pages that will render within it. You can change it all you want if you want, but yeah. So essentially, in case that wasn't confusing enough, the layout component is a special component that allows you to keep the HTML elements of something you want to keep re-rendering over and over again in the code, and not have to keep rewriting this piece over and over again, because that's what would happen. You would have to keep rewriting this piece all the time and have it everywhere. In this case, you don't have to do that because it has the layout component base in it. And I believe it's also more optimized. I'm going to go back to this now that I've explained what the main layout is, in case basically your main layout is just a special component that's used for having repeated re-renderings of the same thing over and over again without you writing it over and over again. That's what it is. So when it comes to here, let's digest what's going on here real quick. So we have our router app assembly type app assembly. So what is this? This is basically the how do I explain it? Oh, if you're coming from React or Angular or even another .NET framework, you're probably used to having your routing done in some global page, or some very a page that has just all the routings in it. React, I think, has its own version of it. Angular has its own version of it. And this router piece here, that is what that is. What it's going to do is automatically scan all your pages for that page URI. So if I went here, it's going to go out of its way to scan everything here to find all this and make a list of it internally. So you don't have to. Now, I believe you can do this step on your own without relying on this, but this is just done for you, so you don't have to do it. So that is the difference. And then we're going to go down to here. So I think that this is a little bit obvious. You have found and not found. So basically, if something happens that you can't reach this route for whatever reason within the route data, it'll just give you this instead. So it actually create a layout of main layout, and then just give you the paragraph that says sorry, there's nothing at this address or whatever. So it's going to keep the layout and just add in the actual HTML here. But all this is an if-else statement, if you want to think of it that way. Now we're going to go down to the route view. So the route view, in this case, this is where the pages are going to actually render within all this. The page is going to be rendering within the route view. And the reason why is because of that, that page directed that you have. You can also set it up in the layout which the pages will render in. It's why all the pages render in that big box within the main layout, because of this component essentially. So that's what that means. And then route data is just the data of what you're expecting to show. So the pages of, in this case, counter fetch data, and and index is what you're going to see within the route data. And the layout we've chosen is going to be the main layout, and this is why you see everything like this, essentially. The focus on navigate is nothing too crazy. All it is that essentially you're telling it that on this selector, on an H1 HTML element, whenever I go between the components, so if I go between counter and fetch data, let's say, I'm going to have this automatically focus on the H1 element within it. So wherever the H1 element is on that on that component, I'm just going to scroll up to it basically. So let's say I was scrolled down all the way down on the counter page, and then I go switch to a different page. It's just going to automatically put me all the way up to the H1 portion of the page. So that's all that is. It's more of a convenience thing than anything. It's nothing too crazy, but I thought that since we're just going over this, let's just go over that. So the next thing of import that I would like to talk about is actually the import. Haha. See what I did there. So again, if you have used React or Angular before, you probably have seen something like this where you have all your imports in one page. And then after the fact, you'll probably have those same imports within, if you need them, within the separate pages or separate components of your project. So before you have any use in these, like before you can use a library, they have to be put in here. So if you want to put in certain components of a library, they first have to put in this import.razor page, and then you can have them in your components. So there's that. So that's all that is really. And both React and Angular have a way of doing it as well. So now we're going to get into the actual like something a little bit that's more common within websites, and that is the www.root page. So here, this is basically all the static files that you have on your website. So this is only going to be in the client, and in that client you can have in the www.root you can have your CSS files, your JavaScript files, any let me see, I have a list here, any images as well. You have your static HTML, JS library files, CSS, images, scripts, fonts, things of that nature are all going to go into www.root file. This is basically where you're going to put the media stuff that doesn't change here. So anything that's not a C# file, basically anything that isn't a Razor component, you can put it here if it has to do with the client side, essentially. If that is something you want the user to see, because it's going to be public. So people are going to have access to this as well. Also, let's go over this real quick. Not that, packages. So the way that Microsoft works is through the use of packages if you want to get like a third-party library in there. So let's say that in this case, I want to get a new library. Let's say I want to get Blazor. The way you do that is by going to your packages, right-click that, manage Nuget Packages, and you'll open up something called the Nuget Manager. You can do this through either the Nuget Manager or through the actual console. And in here, you could go to Browse, because any of the .NET library stuff is going to be within the Nuget website or whatever, the Nuget repository, what do we want to call it. And if I want to look for Blazor, I could look for it here. And here it is. So all you have to do to install it is just click it, find it, make sure that it's the right people. You know, you don't want to be installing random crap from random people. Just make sure that there's enough downloads and it's from the, you know, the authors are the correct and all that jizzy jazz. But when you finally do download it, you'll see your packages here within the package folder. And that's all that really is. And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm going to bring up another thing called these analyzers. So I think you've seen this. Anytime you get an error, it will yell at you and give you like a message. That's because of these analyzers. So an analyzer is just another Nuget package, but it was separated within the solution so that it's easier for you to find these analyzers if you want to make changes to them. or if you want to add your own or whatever. If you want to remove them or add your own, they're in their own little separate place to make it easier for you. But as you can see, they're all Nuget packages. Let me check if you can see that. Yeah, they're all .Nuget packages, and it's just that the Visual Studio went out of its way to separate them for you. So there's nothing really different between these and these, except obviously the fact that their use is for the errors that you get, and you know, that you don't actually need them, but it's good to have them. I believe that's all there is to that. I guess I'll go into the dependency stuff. Essentially, when I was talking about before about the dependency, you don't have to have this dependent on the client. The only reason why you do in this case is because within the program.cs file, there is something down here called map fallback to file index.html, and this exists within the client in the www.root. So it's right here. And I think there's other stuff it has to do. So I encountered these kinds of like problems when it comes to pre-rendering. So in that video, basically we delegated some of the work to the server so that the client, so that the actual user has the ability to maybe navigate the website up until the client loads without seeing a big problem. So essentially what this is doing is similar by pointing to the index.html file in the client side. Now you could remove this and change it and decouple it completely if you want to, but I don't think it's worth it. I don't think this is doing anything too crazy when it comes to that. And you probably are gonna try to go for a different solution anyways, like having the pre-render to bypass the WebAssembly loading issue, or you're gonna have the loading screen do the thing, do the circle thing, essentially. That's all you could really do right now. But everything that I said now are the most important things that you have to understand within a project, Blazor project. And I think this is basically for most .NET projects now, especially going to .NET 6, .NET 7. So this might ring true for other technologies out there. There's not much more differences here. So really, I think those are the things that people get most confused of because I don't really talk about them in other videos. I don't go over them. So in this video, hopefully that you got some clarity when it comes to the actual project structure. Because yeah, it could be daunting. I know there's a lot of stuff here, especially if you start digging into, you can see just a lot of things that you're not familiar with. But what I explained to you today are the things that are the most important and will make the most impact in your project. And anything else that you might find are things that you have to find along your own programming journey, or when you have something like really specific that you want to work on. Everything I've explained to you is basically stuff that you probably have encountered in .NET if you come from a .NET, another .NET framework like Razor or even something earlier. You've probably seen similar concepts being applied here. They have just changed, and they have probably either changed the names or changed some of the functions, but the main like structure, I keep using that word, but the actual main idea, let's say, of what it's supposed to do still exists, even if the names have changed. So that there is something that controls the Visual Studio itself and how it launches your program, something that controls what the actual starting point of the program.cs, and anything that it has to do. How your libraries are going to look like, how your project looks like, and how your projects are dependent with to one another in order to fetch any sort of data or whatever else it might need. And the only differences here are going to be maybe the App.Razor stuff, because it actually uses components that are Blazor specific components, and how the main layout works, because you probably have seen this a bunch of times, but you never touched it or whatever. And I get it, but you normally, like, if you're sticking to that layout, it's fine. But now you could actually make changes to it, because now you know that this is just a layout. Excuse me. It's just a layout component, and you can make changes to it without actually hurting your app whatsoever. You just have to understand how everything is being rendered in this add body, the syntax of that. And that's all there's to it. So thank you very much. Hopefully this cleared up some minds. I hope I didn't confuse you on that layout stuff. But yeah, I hope that this clears it up for everybody. I know it's a long video, kind of dry. However, this should allow you, either coming from a .NET framework that isn't this or being brand new, you can look at the solution without being scared of it. So see you later on the next video.